Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again, and finally, to another episode of Vanilla Minecraft. It's been quite some time since I've been able to say that, because I am the worst. But anyway, today we're heading up to the floating platform, obviously, and we're going to work on a new build up here today relating to our villager trading stuff. So down there at the end, we have our beautiful villager breeder and trading system. That still works lovely, as does our crop farm and our pumpkin and melon farm that we use to fuel our trades. However, there is still one resource that we're missing to make those trades go smoothly, and that is sugarcane. So the big issue is that I need a lot of librarians. In fact, over half of the villagers that I want to keep are librarians, and I'm still missing tons of them. The main reason for that is, of course, sugarcane. Every time you need to unlock every single trait of a librarian, you burn through a lot of paper, and unfortunately, the only sugarcane farm that I have... Hello? The only sugarcane farm that I have in my area is the one back on my island, which, as you may recall, is not really built for efficiency. That farm was designed to look interesting and work in a unique way, not so much to be used for mass production. As a result, I am constantly out of sugarcane and haven't really been able to fully trade with villagers to the point of getting all the trades that I want. So that's what we're taking care of today. We're going to build a sugarcane farm, and we're actually going to do that over here next to our crop farm. I think I actually mentioned this idea back when I initially built the crop farm itself, but what I want to do is expand this little road we have out a little bit further and build another building next to it and turn that into our sugarcane farm. Now, we do have a little bit of a theme to go with here. The crop farm building was inspired from a building from the 1930s or 40s. Can't really remember exactly, but I do want to carry that on. I want the two buildings to look like they could be in the same city and kind of fit together. So that's the idea there, but I do still want them to look distinct and different from one another, so I think our sugarcane farm building is going to look more like a factory. At least that's my hope. Now, there are a couple problems with that idea, though. First and foremost, when you think of an old factory, you tend to think of a big block of bricks with some windows in it, which has a lot of downsides when it comes to building in Minecraft. First up, bricks are not really a great building material. They're not as bad as a lot of people think, but using them as a main material in a wall doesn't really work very well. The texture itself doesn't look very good. Of course, they are getting updated in 1.14, and that texture looks a good bit better, but it's also still very repetitive, and there's not really anything else in the game that you can use to break the texture up. So it doesn't really work well on a large scale, unless you're working with an ornate building and you can add a lot of decoration to it. I mean, maybe if we had stuff like cracked bricks or mossy bricks or something, it would be a little better, but it's just not going to cut it. So I've thought about this for a while, and I think the best thing we can do to capture the feeling of a brick wall without this issue here is using undyed terracotta. So undyed terracotta works relatively well with brick. The colors match fairly well. And I think if we make the majority of the wall out of terracotta and then have patches of bricks showing through, it should actually feel okay. So basically the effect it'll give is that the wall has some kind of coating on it, and parts of it are peeling away and showing the bricks underneath. If we do this very carefully, and we do, these big patches of brick showing through at just the right amount, I think we'll get the feeling of a brick wall without the downsides of this repetitive texture across the entire thing. So I think that's what we're going to do with the walls. We do still have the problem that factories are typically very bland buildings. They're typically just, rectangles. There's not a lot of architecture to them. Obviously some newer ones there is, but not so much in the classic ones. So for that sake, for that purpose, I think we're going to have to exaggerate things a little bit. I think we'll probably have to add some details that aren't necessarily realistic or logical, just for the sake of making a better looking build. I do need to be careful with that. Of course, I do still want this to feel like an old school factory, so hopefully we won't go overboard. The last issue we have is that factories are traditionally very large, and they have a lot of stuff going on around them, but we don't want a massive build here that dwarfs everything in the area, especially because, well, the sugarcane farm itself probably isn't going to be very big, so we're probably going to have to make a caricature of a factory almost. It's going to be a lot smaller than a reasonable factory actually would be. So, with all of those things in mind, hopefully the end result still turns out looking like a factory of some kind. We really just want the vibe of a factory, I think is the big thing. So, I'm going to go ahead and get to work on that. I have a lot of gathering to do first off. I think I need quite a lot of clay to make the amount of bricks I'm going to need, actually. So I'm going to take care of that, and then we're going to build the facade of the building, the entire exterior of it at least, and then we'll move on to the inside, build ourselves a farm, and hopefully do some cool stuff with the interior that I have in mind. Man, this video just does not want to be done. During that build alone, the server had 2 hiccups, and I also blue screened twice, losing well over 90 minutes of building footage. So, if I managed to build a time-lapse out of that mess, and it's a little bit skippy, well, sorry. I did the best I could, I am sure. Anyway, here is our factory, and there's a few things to note. One, it feels a little smaller than I thought it was going to. In fact, that's kind of strange. I actually thought it was going to be a lot bigger feeling. I was actually trying not to go any larger than this. I think I was underestimating how big our crop farm building actually is, because I think that's what makes it feel smaller, because that building is just so big. I guess I didn't realize that when it was all there on its own. I also didn't really think that this build should go further than the start of our villager area, which it's really close to doing. But maybe I should try and make it a little bit wider. And I could do that relatively easily. Like, I don't think we're going to be finalizing this build today, for reasons we'll talk about in a little while. So I suppose I could kind of chop this part of the build off and move it over like 10 or 15 blocks, and then connect this wall to it. I think that would probably help a little bit just to make the build a little wider, but I don't know. Maybe it's not really necessary. You guys will have to let me know. I'm not entirely opposed to it, but I don't think it's terrible right now either. I think the build itself looks okay. I think it kind of catches the style that I wanted it to, at least as close as I can get with vanilla textures and whatnot. I do think the smokestacks need a little bit of work, though. I feel like they're, maybe a little too short. Like, they kind of get obscured by that bit poking out from the roof there, which was kind of a last-minute addition. And the smoke itself also is a little off. It kind of feels like chimney smoke rather than smokestack smoke, if you know what I mean. I think that's because it should technically be getting bigger at the top rather than smaller. Though I also didn't want to make a huge cloud over this place, so I don't know. I'll probably play around with that a little bit more on my own. But let's go ahead and get a closer look. The build itself, I think it's okay. All the little details, the little pipes and fire escapes and semi-truck trailer out front, things like that. I actually had to do research for this, by the way. I wasn't sure if semis existed in the 30s or 40s. I mean, I knew that they did, but I wasn't sure they were prominent. Turns out they were prominent long before the 30s or 40s. So, yeah, I think we're good. But this is what the build looks like. I think it works okay. You guys will have to let me know if there's something I should do to improve it. But I honestly don't know if there's much I can do without making it significantly larger or adding a ton of detail to the outside, which, again, I don't really want to make something huge. I don't want it to be like all-encompassing, and I don't want to try and make an entire city up here, but maybe there's some stuff I could do. I'm not entirely sure. I'm a little bit creatively blocked at the moment, honestly. So that's the outside of the building. Let's go ahead and take a peek on the inside. And, not a whole lot to talk about in here, honestly. We'll be working on the interior in a little bit, at least sort of. I don't think we're actually going to be able to finish it today. Again, we'll talk about that shortly. But there are a couple things in here worth mentioning, most notably the lighting. You'll notice that it is super duper bright in here, and that's not just because of the torches. Obviously, we're going to be getting rid of all of those and, making some hidden lighting down here on the floor. But the building itself is also really bright up on the walls and everything, and that's because we're sneaking in natural sunlight. That's what all of these hoppers in the ceiling are for. So I do hope to integrate those into the build itself. We'll probably have iron bars or fences of some kind coming down and either holding up lighting or holding up walkways or something, but I do want to work those into the build somehow so they make a little more sense. More importantly, however, they are also letting in natural light because they don't block sunlight. And that means that all the way down, beneath the hoppers at least, is essentially light sources. That means that all of our walls are all lit up and not horribly dark like they normally would be in a tall build like this one. Though you can see some shadows still showing up there. I suppose I could probably fix that with a couple little tweaks along the edge there. We'll see what I do. But I think that is a huge improvement for a building like this one, where we have all of these windows, we've got all of this going on, and this entire area up here is based on something that they do in real-life factories, specifically to let in natural light. So that's why I felt that it should probably be brighter in here. Of course, at nighttime, it does get a little dark, so we'll have to watch out for that. Of course, we don't want any valid spawning spaces anywhere in here, so lighting is still important. But I thought that was worth mentioning. That is definitely something I want to maintain going forward, is that bright natural light that we have. So all of that being said, I do think we should work on the interior. Before that, though, I do want to work on the sugarcane farms themselves. And I want to get those in place. That way we have all of the technical aspects of this farm taken care of. Now, before I actually dive into that, there is something I want to test out first. So I have a few ideas for what I can do with sugarcane farm designs. Originally, I did want to try and build something inside of the building itself and make it actually part of the factory, but no matter how hard I tried, I could not make a sugarcane farm that really looked like it belonged in here, right? Because it was just plants growing, just inherently doesn't really feel like it fits. And then I tried to put them inside of like a big tank or something like that, so they were still technically in here, but that was really reducing the number of plants that we had, and of course the point of this is to have an efficient sugarcane farm. So I do think we're going to be placing that down below in a hidden room below the floor here, but before we do that, I do want to go and test out some designs in a test world. Here we are at the edge of my main test world. I would show you guys around a little bit, but there's a lot of spoilery stuff out there past the fog that I haven't had the chance to cover up, so maybe sometime in the future. For right now, though, let's talk sugarcane. So, originally, my plan for this build was to do a design like this one, where anytime one of the plants grows to 3 tall, they all get harvested, or at least all of them in that row. And there's a lot of perks to this design. One, very, very simple. Just a row of pistons, a row of observers, and a line of redstone. That's all it takes to get this action going on. It also would be very easy to disable if we ever wanted to turn the farm off. All we would need to do is send power to this redstone line. And it also would work really easily for a collection system, because all we would need to do is take a signal from this line and send that down to send off a minecart to pick up all of our sugarcane. And then, of course, we wouldn't need an unloader or a timer or anything like that, because the minecart could simply sit on top of a hopper and unload whenever it wasn't running. So this is a really simple solution. I like elegant and simple solutions like that, but it does have one major drawback, and that is a huge issue with efficiency. So the issue is that if all of the plants grow to stage 2, and let's say they're all growing for another 10 minutes, and they're all seconds away from growing to stage 3, but then the middle one grows first. Well, both of the side ones just broke off, and all of that time they spent growing was wasted. They will never regain all of that time that they were just spent trying to grow to reach rank 3. It doesn't transfer down to the bottom plant. So, unfortunately, that would mean that there's a ton of time that we're wasting trying to grow plants just to break them off. The solution to this is to make each plant harvest individually, kind of like this. Now, the benefit here is that this is still a very simple design. All we do is send the redstone signal from the observer into a block. That block powers the piston via quasi-connectivity, and then it updates it by also powering this rail down below. If you're not too familiar with redstone, that might seem like black magic voodoo. That is kind of the weird part of redstone where things are a little bit illogical, but it is all very simple once you understand how it works. So I assume this is probably one of the more prominent designs these days. I don't really keep up with popular farm designs very well. But this is a really good solution. But at the same time, it doesn't have the kind of perks that the other one does. It's not quite as easy to turn off. It can still be done. It would just take a little bit more building to do. And it also doesn't have a way for us to easily trigger a collection system. So we either need to have an unloader with minecarts just constantly running, or we need to have some kind of timer. Now, again, all of that stuff is very simple. It's not like this design is bad by any means, but I do kind of like the simplicity that other one has. So what I want to do is run a little bit of a test to see just how different these two really are. If this design isn't that much slower, then I would like to go with this, because it just seems really simple and kind of clean and an easy way to do things. That being said, I do assume this one is going to be pretty noticeably faster, but that's what we're here to find out. I also want to, at the same time, run these three over here. These three farms are the same design as this one, where the entire side gets harvested, or the entire unit, rather, gets harvested at once, but there is less and less observers on each one. I was kind of curious what that would actually do for the rates, because, like, theoretically, the fact that this only harvests half as often, it could mean that the sugarcane has more time to grow in these individual spots. So I'm kind of curious to see if that means that these rates will actually keep up or even surpass this one. I don't know. I'm kind of curious to see what'll happen. I don't actually think that'll happen. I don't think any of these would be as practical, but I'm curious, so I'm going to try it out. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and let these run for a little while, and then we'll see what the final tally is for how many they get after, however long I let them go. And, well, once I've decided on a design, we'll get back to the world and, build the actual setup. So the results are in, and they are roughly what I expected them to be, though I will say I was kind of surprised to see that these four farms over here, the ones with the pistons that all extend at once, all ended up being really similar to each other in numbers. I kind of expected one or two of them to pull ahead and the others to lag behind, but in reality they're all hovering right around 600 crops harvested during the time that I left them running. And the only real outlier, this one being 617, is because this one harvested right before I shut it off, so it got a little bit of an extra bump, whereas the lowest one at 593 actually has tons of plants ready to be kind of chopped off whenever. So, yeah, I was kind of surprised to see that there was, no difference, really, depending on the number of observers you had. It all kind of worked out to be the same. At least in this little experiment. Keep in mind, this isn't the most scientific of tests. Anyway, the more important part about this test was to compare the difference between farm designs like those and a design like this one, which harvests everything individually. Now, of course, this one was always going to be the fastest. There's no way these other farms would match its speed. The question was, how much of a difference does it actually make? And it turns out, about 15 to 20%. At least based on, this little random test. It could vary a little bit depending on, rates and stuff, and maybe I got a little lucky or a little unlucky, but it is still a pretty significant difference overall. And because of that, I do think we're going to go with this design in our farm. Of course, this was entirely meant to be a relatively efficient sugarcane farm, so not getting an extra 15 to 20% efficiency just for slightly more work in the setup wouldn't really make much sense. Now, I do want to point out, there is a couple broken plants here, you may have noticed. I'm pretty sure that will not happen on the server. I think the reason that happened here is because I had a higher tick rate while I was testing this, so these plants were all growing super duper quickly. And it's possible that once these plants were broken off, they could have grown twice almost instantaneously, and that could have outpaced the observer. So I assume that that's what's actually happened here, and I don't think that'll happen with a vanilla tick rate, but, well, I suppose we'll see. So, Now that I know what I'm going to do, and now I know the design I'm going with, I'm going to hop back onto the server, build our sugarcane farms, and also build the storage system and the retrieval system for the harvested sugarcane itself. And once all of that's taken care of, we can talk about the interior a little bit. So our sugarcane farms are up and running now, at least for the most part. There's still a couple little things I need to do regarding the input and output of the system, but the farm itself is completely up and running and functioning just as it should. So, of course, we have the individual sugarcane cells. They're the same design you saw earlier, with the little addition of some pistons up top. So these are the shutoff system. Essentially, all we will do is extend those pistons to be in front of the observer, and that will effectively shut down the growth of sugarcane, and will allow us to reboot the system whenever we want to without any hassle. So that was the best solution I could think of for that. Of course, we also have the collection system, which is just a minecart down below, and that is triggered by this timer right here. This is just a classic hopper timer. I'm sure you've seen these 1,000 times. But basically, once every full cycle, so every time all of the 5 stacks of stone that we have in there transfers to the right hopper, and then transfers back to the left, we'll get a redstone signal out this way, which of course will send these minecarts out to collect things. Thankfully, that happens once every just over 4 minutes. So basically, we have plenty of time for sugarcane to grow and get cropped off, and then before it has a chance to despawn, the minecarts will get sent to pick it up. That actually worked out really well. Nice and easy solution. I love when that happens. So, we collect our sugarcane, we send it over here, it goes upwards, and then we'd send it into this monstrosity here. Yeah, not my prettiest redstone build, if I'm honest, and realistically, this is probably going to get completely redone at some point, most likely in the near future when I hook up the inputs and outputs, but for the time being, it is completely functional and should do the job. So this is essentially the same system that we have over in our crop farm, but if you weren't around or don't remember that system, the idea is basically twofold. One, we have a bunch of chests which are essentially just bulk storage, so we can store up tons and tons of sugarcane, and then the bottom half of the system is a shulker box filling and retrieving system. So basically we have 2 shulker boxes in here. Those will get completely filled up with sugarcane. And then anytime we want to retrieve them, we just put an empty shulker box into the system by putting it into this hopper line here. And of course, there will be a better input for that. And that will essentially go to one side or the other, alternating between them, and replace the one that's currently there. And then the the shulker box that is full of sugar will get sent back up to me. So that is how that works. There are a few downsides to it, though, especially in regards to this particular farm that weren't really an issue with the crop farm. One, all of these chests that are here for bulk storage purposes, well, they don't actually filter down into the shulker boxes. Only the bottom chests do, which is kind of annoying. With the crop farm, it's not a big deal because the crop farm was designed for you to actually actively access these chests. They're just right in the back room, and the shulker box system is just a convenience on top of that. Whereas with this system, because this is down in the depths of this redstone basement, you're not really meant to get down here and access these. So that's kind of a bummer. It means that we'd be piling up a bunch of sugarcane, which, yes, we would have access to, but we would have to go through, this area in order to get it, which I don't really like. So I think I'm going to end up changing this system a little bit. The solution to that problem, rather, pardon me, it's getting a little bit late. But the solution to that problem is to actually stagger the chests. so they filter into each other. That way, basically, the top chest is always filtering into the second to the third to the fourth, and that fourth down to the shulker box. That way they're not all individual and just kind of wasting space down here. So that's the solution to that. The other issue is that the shulker boxes themselves don't technically fill up until pretty much the entire chest system is full. Not necessarily the entire thing, but because the shulker box on the right here will only start getting sugarcane once we reach these rows of chests, it's not ideal, and it won't actually fill at the highest rate until we get to the last row, or the last column, I should say. So that's a little annoying as well. Realistically, it's not too much of a problem because I can just AFK here for a night or two and probably get most of the chests filled up. So I don't think we're going to worry too much about that one. So that is our system, at least so far. Obviously, we still need to hook up a proper input and output, but that is going to relate to the factory itself. Because obviously we don't want to come down here to get our shulker boxes. That would be lame. We want to set up something in here in order to do it. Now, I don't think we're actually going to do that today because I don't actually know what I'm going to do with the interior of this place just yet. I have some ideas, and I have a general idea of where I want to go with it, but I don't think we're going to finalize the interior build. And because of that, I don't really want to set up the final inputs and outputs either because I may change my mind on it. So, that being said, I do want to tinker around with the interior here just a little bit today. I want to put down a couple little minor builds so I can show you guys kind of some things that I'm thinking about doing. Mostly one slightly technical build I'd like to have in here as a little bit of motion and interest. So, I'm actually going to go ahead and set that stuff up really quick, just as a kind of a quick demonstration of what I want to do. And hopefully you guys can give me some of your ideas as well, and then hopefully in the near future we'll come back and finish this place up. Kind of hate leaving projects that aren't huge unfinished after an episode, but what you gonna do? So, I'm gonna go get to it. I'll be right back. So I've thrown a few things in here. Nothing too impressive, obviously, but for the sake of getting some ideas across, I think they'll be fine. So here we have a couple big tanks. I like the idea of having something like this in here. I'm not entirely sold on this particular design just yet, but something along these lines I think would look kind of cool. Not entirely sure about the pipes or tubes coming out of them, though. I kind of like the idea, and realistically, this is probably about the best we can do in vanilla survival Minecraft, but I'm not entirely sure. I suppose maybe if we just have a big empty spot on a wall, that's a good way to dress it up a little bit, so we'll probably use it for that. Over here, I made a little forklift design. I was actually experimenting with a bunch of different ones, and the issue I was running into is they all felt really big in this area. Like, the building itself feels kind of big, but once you actually start building in it, you fill up the space super quickly. So, the forklifts just felt gigantic. So I tried to come up with the absolute smallest design I could think of that still felt decently like a forklift, and that's what I came up with. Not entirely sure it's convincing, but I think it's kind of cute. And then over here we have my attempt at making like a pallet with stuff for shipping. I think it's okay. Probably replacing the chest with something non-wood colored would make it look a little bit more interesting. I was also thinking, and I don't know how this would turn out, so don't quote me on it just yet, but I was thinking that maybe I could make a map art of boxes, like cardboard boxes, and having those stacked up in here might look really cool as well. Again, not entirely sure how that would look. I don't know how the map color palette would work in that situation, and the item frame borders might kind of ruin it, but it's something I would like to try out, so I'll experiment with that before we work in here again. The only other thing I wanted to bring up is the idea of machines and things that add motion to the inside of our factory building. And the one in particular that I have in mind is a conveyor belt. Now, unfortunately, we can no longer do the really good design for conveyor belts. So back in the day, what we could do is put an armor stand in a minecart, and then we could send that underneath the carpet, and whatever it had on its head would poke through. So in this case, for example, we could have a lime-dyed leather helmet, and that would look like a little bundle of sugarcane going along, and it would look really, really good. Or, you know, in other builds, you could put an iron helmet on, and it would look like a little metal plate going. That was a really cool building trick, and I loved using it. But unfortunately, ever since Minecraft 1.9, I want to say, there's been a bug where you can no longer get armor stands into minecarts, which is really a bummer. It makes me very, very sad that that's still a thing, because it would look really cool in here to do that. Unfortunately, because that's no longer working, the only option we have is something like this, which allows us to send items across. Now, I've been experimenting with this a little bit, and I think this is probably the best setup for it. Not visually, obviously. We would do something a little bit better. But basically the way this is working functionally is you drop an item onto a carpet, and you push that carpet and the item with a slime block onto a row of carpets with ice underneath. So that's how that works, and it works fairly well. You can also make this go a lot further if you use blue ice, which is the new slipperier version from 1.13, and if you replace this block right here with ice. I've actually specifically swapped that out to stone to slow down the items so they don't go at Mach 1, because normally they travel super duper quick. But I think this is reasonable. It's certainly not perfect, but I think it looks okay. I was trying to come up with other ways that you could do this and get this effect with, varying speeds and stuff. And honestly, there's not a lot of options. The best other option I found was using water, which works okay. This is on blue ice, so this is pretty much the max you can get from it. And it works okay. You can do... you can get a decently long conveyor belt from it, and you can control the speed by determining how long the item is traveling in water and all of that. But it's also kind of inconsistent, as you can see. And on top of that, obviously very, very bulky. So probably not a great option in our case. Plus you hear the running water, which isn't ideal. But it is an option. It's definitely something that you could work with in certain circumstances if you needed something a little bit different than this one. But I think for my purposes, this style is... I've trapped myself. This style is probably the way to go. So what I'm thinking of doing with this personally is making it so it shoots out sugarcane, and then like right around here, there's another machine, maybe with like a piston going up and down right here. And basically we would pick up the sugarcane here and then dispense probably sugar out the other side. Basically make it look like we were processing the sugarcane. I think that could look pretty cool. The issue is space, really. I don't know how to do that in the area that we have. Maybe we could have it going against the walls, but then I don't know where I'd put the tanks. I'm not entirely sure. Again, I'm not really sure how I want this place to be laid out. Honestly, I'm kind of struggling just in general with focus recently, which is why videos have been terribly slow, because building takes me ages and ages to think of, because my brain's basically turned off. So hopefully that stops being a thing soon, and hopefully you guys actually give me some ideas so I can kickstart that a little bit. But yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at with this project. I want to add conveyor belts and maybe some other kinds of machines, maybe something, that looks kind of mechanical moving around, or I don't really want to do too much with like lights flashing on and off. That causes a lot of lighting updates, but you get the idea. Stuff that adds motion and interesting things to the building. Just so this building has more of a purpose, because obviously, the entire functional part of it is hidden away, so we need to do something interesting in here. And I will do my best to make it look cool too. I have some ideas of what I want to do, but again, my brain's kind of in off mode, so kind of struggling with it. But I'm sure I'll figure it out. Anyway, that being said, I do think I'm going to call it here for today. I would say that we would work on this probably next episode and try and finish it up, because I hate leaving builds unfinished when they're not massive. So, it kind of bothers me. But I think that next episode, being episode 50, finally, I think that we're going to do a world tour, actually, for the first time since I actually started this series, and indeed since long before it. So I think that's actually going to be kind of fun, especially for me. There's a lot of things that I haven't looked at in quite a while, and it'll probably remind me of some builds I need to finish, I'm sure. So that's probably what we're going to be doing. Hopefully you guys are going to look forward to that. Oh god. Wait. Okay, he's stuck up there. I'm going to go hide in my building. So hopefully you guys are going to enjoy that and are looking forward to it. And hopefully you have some ideas for our factory building. You're really creeping me out there, guy. Okay, so I'm going to go before I give myself nightmares. And I will see you guys next time. So thank you for watching. I hope you had an awesome time, and I'll see you then.